support raising is not really about money. If people think it's about money, they've kind of already got two strikes against them, I think. It's about vision and relationships.
Welcome to It's Not About the Money, a podcast in search of grounded fundraising. I'm Heather, and together with my co-host Andy, we look beyond the quick tips and formulas. Join us as we explore the nuance and complexity of ministry fundraising. If you want to thrive in partner development, not just survive it, this is the place for you. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are going to zoom out and take a broad look at the fundraising fundamental principles with a trusted and well-respected guest. Andy, would you like to intro our guest?
Absolutely. So I have the tall order of introducing to you Dr. Steve Shadrach. We'll just call him Steve for the purposes of the show. But for those of you who don't know, Steve is passionate about missions mobilization and fundraising. Maybe that's the broadest way to say it. So started way back as a college and missions pastor in Fayetteville. From there, went on to found student mobilization ministries known as STUMO. Also founded the traveling team, worked for the U.S. Center for World Mission, also in the field of mobilization, but also part of the leadership team for the Perspectives study program. So many of our listeners may have taken Perspectives at some point in the past. And then in 2000, you became the executive director for the Center for Missions Mobilization. And you served in that capacity for, almost 20 years. And then somewhere in there, you also founded Support Raising Solutions and wrote 4 books. And that's how Heather and I think, were first introduced to you was through the God Ask. And this is a text that we lean on, I would say, significantly in our own fundraising coaching. Yeah. Did I manage to hit the career highlights there?
Well, my resume is not complete without mentioning the 22-inch, 2.5-pound rainbow trout I caught in a lake in northern New Mexico years ago. That's probably my greatest claim to fame.
22 inches.
What type of fishing? I'm not a fishing person, but I know there's different forms of fishing. What type were you doing? Well,
most people are bass fishermen, but I love to catch trout in streams and mountain lakes. And then, of course, that particular brand, Rainbow Trout, very delicious. We had it after pictures, of course. We then had it filleted and cooked and eaten 30 minutes later. So, delicious.
Nice. Wow. And would that be fly fishing?
Well, I'm intimidated by fly fishing.
Okay.
Me too.
I'm just a spin caster. The true fishermen look down on me. I spin cast, not fly fish, and then I keep some of my fish. That's the ultimate sin, of course, is to keep a fish. But I promise them that I will eat it.
And enjoy it, no doubt.
Delicious.
And enjoy it, exactly.
Well, Steve, tell us your story a little bit beyond your resume. How did a young Steve Shadrach navigate an early sense of calling? What kind of set you on your particular and this kind of unique life path that you're on right now?
Well, I came to Christ at age 18 in Dallas, thinking I was a Christian. So many, Americans, we all, grow up in the church and think we're Christians. But a staff member with Athletes in Action, that's a division of Campus Crusade Crew, befriended me and took me to the airport one day and teach me how to share my faith. And lo and behold, it was disastrous. Everything went so wrong that day. But the good thing was I realized I had never received Christ into my life. And that was the day that I committed my life to Christ, and that set me on a path. And this man really followed up well with me, and I went off to college and kind of went off as a missionary. And so I wasn't planning on joining a fraternity, but within a few weeks was moving into one, and that became a great mission field for me at the University of Arkansas here in Fayetteville. And that kind of set the course of my life, I think, as I got to see these guys. I lovingly call them hellions, if you don't mind. But they're the biggest partiers on campus. And I realized that once you lead one of these guys to Christ, the same zeal they were putting into the party life is now the same zeal they're going to put into following Christ and trying to influence others for Christ. And so I kind of got sold on that. I got addicted to it. There are good addictions and bad addictions, right?
Sure.
And this idea of leading, especially fraternity guys, I guess that's been a real focus of mine. I'm still working on it. I'm still doing it today. I'm 68 and still hanging out with fraternity guys today. But once they come to Christ and grow in Christ, they make great laborers. And so that's kind of been the focus of my life is Matthew 9, where Jesus says the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. How do we raise up more laborers and spread them out across the planet? That's really been the focus of my life. But then if that's the greatest need, the greatest obstacle, as I've observed over the years, you all as well, I'm sure, is how do you get them funded? How do you get these laborers funded, fully funded, and spread out across the planet? So I know that's the topic of our discussion today. And so if the greatest need is laborers, Jesus said, I think one of the greatest obstacles of getting those laborers raised up and sent out is the funding piece. And so that's one reason I'm so passionate about both those, raising up laborers, but also getting them funded.
Yeah. Well, and I can imagine that over your years in ministry, all of your thoughts on fundraising have evolved and really taken shape. But can you remember your first donor meeting?
Ooh, good question. You know, I was a college pastor in my home church here in Fayetteville, a great church, and I was, like you said, college and missions pastor.
Yep.
And but I realized I really wasn't a pastor. I struggled with that role, and I loved college students. So that's when we launched out to start this STUMO, Student Mobilization, in 1986. And so I remember I got 6 weeks of severance pay. I thought, how gracious to give me that 6 weeks, to go out and raise my support. I did not have any training at all, but see, I was highly motivated. I was married and with a 3-year-old, 2-year-old, 1-year-old, and one in the hopper. So if any of your listeners are having a hard time getting motivated in their support raising, getting married and having children has a way of kind of lighting a fire.
Start procreating.
Yeah, that'll put the burden of responsibility right there on those shoulders. But so the only thing I knew what to do is just to go to every single person that I had ever known in my short little 30 years of life and meet with them face to face and share with them about this vision of reaching college students for Christ, and then inviting them to join our monthly team. And sometimes I would suggest an amount or a range, but then let them answer after I ask them. And so who needs all the training in the books? I just gave you the secret right there. We can close down the podcast right now. That's it. That's the secret right there.
Good night, everybody.
And good night, everyone. Yeah. But within 6 weeks, praise God, I was at full support. Pretty straightforward. Yeah. We go into a lot of the biblical basis and a lot of the how-tos and a lot of the issues and obstacles and et cetera with that book, The God Ask, that y'all mentioned you all use.
Yep.
But the heart and soul of it is meeting with individuals face to face, sharing your vision, and then inviting them to partner with you.
Yeah.
All right. So, in the God Ask, you do talk about some systems and some strategies to succeed in fundraising. Can you also address the need for adaptability?
Well, that's a great question. I think if people think it's about money, they've kind of already got two strikes against them, I think. It's about vision and relationships. The one thing you probably have that a lot of the folks you'll be meeting with don't have is a ministry vision, a calling to accomplish this ministry vision. And then secondly, you want to develop or establish a relationship with that person.
Yeah.
And every situation is different. I mean, part of being mature as an individual or having some self-awareness is knowing when to turn the volume up, when to turn the volume down. You run into support raisers that are too aggressive. Sure. They feel like they're, beating them over the head with a bat, trying to force money out of them.
Yep.
But then I see the other side too, and they're too shy, they're too reserved, they're too fearful, and they're not willing to really make the ask. We have not because we ask not, James 4:2. I've seen that happen over and over again in my life in evangelism and in support raising. The parallels between the two are unbelievable. The similarities are just uncanny. Yeah. And so, I think you need to have your presentation down, get ready to, what is it you're going to say? What is it you're going to present? What is it you're going to ask? But be led by the Holy Spirit, be in prayer, bathing that appointment in prayer. And sometimes I go and I don't do my presentation. I just listen. I just listen to this person and try to understand where they're at, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they're burdened about. And then I can sometimes kind of craft what I'm sharing based upon what they share me. It's always good to listen before you speak. And I think that word adaptability, that word flexibility takes a little time to develop that, little experience and maturity in the support raising journey. But it's important, I think.
Yeah. And what I hear you saying is, in order to be adaptable or flexible, well, you really need to have your presentation down. So adaptability and flexibility doesn't equate to
winging it.
Or trying to just be organic. You really need to be prepared. And from a place of being very prepared, you can then adapt and be flexible. Yeah, that's important.
Good. Well, I have a question for you. Maybe you've already kind of answered it in an indirect way, but hypothetical scenario. So let's say that you come across somebody and you've got 5 minutes, you're walking with them a short distance, and you want to instill something in them that will really get them launched in a successful way into fundraising. So which God-esque chapter do you recommend? Or which kind of concept do you try to impress upon them?
Boy. I think probably some of the vision chapters. People kind of criticize me sometimes that, Shadrach, why'd you spend so much time over half the book before you ever got to the how-tos, the technique, And I said, well, if you understand the why behind support raising, you'll figure out the how. Where there's a will, there's a way, my dad would say, And so there's no perfect technique. There are a lot of bad ones. But the why behind it will keep you in the saddle your entire life. And that's why the biblical basis is so critical, to spend those hours and hours really doing personal Bible study on these different topics related to living and asking and ministering on support. What I've noticed over the years, everyone has a strong opinion on this subject. I mean, everybody, parents and pastors and your siblings and your friends, and everybody has a strong opinion. Almost no one has studied the scriptures on the topic. And so I think that I want to take what I do here in life and in ministry and support raising in every category, not based upon others' opinions or my own fears or perceptions, but based upon my own personal, objective, inductive, study of the Word of God. And so I lately, I would say more and more, I'm trying to help people see the power and potential of support raising as one of the most incredible mobilization tools that God has ever given them. And so separate from money, separate from you going out on campus or going to that country or whatever it is, there's a reason God has placed you over the last 20, 25, 30 years, whatever age you are, in the middle of these 100 relationships. You've got this network of relationships. Yeah. And so it's unique. It's one of a kind. And if you don't mobilize that network will not be mobilized. And so why is it that God has called you into ministry? He's now requiring you to raise your support. The way you raise your support is to go to each of these people individually, face to face, and share with them about your story, your life, your testimony, your vision for fulfilling the Great Commission, and then asking them to partner with you. It's the greatest mobilization tool God has ever thought of. And so now you're plopped right in the middle of those 100 people, and you would never be doing this. You would never be setting up these appointments and risking your, all the stuff you risk, the time, the money, the reputation, and everything of going to these people. But here you are face to face with the potential of mobilizing 100 believers to not only start to understand, but pray and give towards the Great Commission. Most of them would have never been mobilized if you had not taken that step to do that. So don't view support raising as a necessary evil. View it as the once in a lifetime opportunity, customized opportunity that God has given you to mobilize this precious network around you to really engage in the person and purposes of Jesus Christ on this planet. And if they can see the power behind that, the potential behind that, oh man, it changes everything.
Yeah. That's powerful. I love that perspective because I feel like so often we get stuck on, I need to raise my funds to meet my needs so that I can do my ministry over there somewhere else. But you're mobilizing the entire church.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. I love it. We've worked with a lot of different types of people. No doubt you've worked with a lot of different types of people as you coach them over the years. I feel like God calls all sorts of personality types. So we see people that are introverts and extroverts, people with large networks, limited networks, people that are just wonderful communicators, and people that are hesitant communicators. But what is maybe a skill or a skill set that can be learned by anybody to boost their chances?
Yeah, excellent question. I think some people's perception is that the successful support raisers are they'd be good at used car salesmen as well. You know, they can slap you on the back and tell you a good joke, and and they're this incredible extrovert, life of the party type person. Really, the most successful support raisers I've observed over the years are introverts. I know that's your extroverts may not, believe that or care that I say that. I don't know. But I've seen it within our own organization. They are the ones that are going to be quietly and faithfully behind the scenes doing all the things they need to do to be successful. They're not going to cut any corners at all. Because how you prepare to raise support is how you raise support. And how you raise your support is how you're going to do your ministry.
Yeah.
And if you're just going to go into it haphazardly and cut corners and sloppy this and sloppy that, and, that's how, if you prepared that way, that's how you're going to do your support raising. That's ultimately how you're going to do your ministry. I hate to say it. But so sometimes these introverts, they're consistent, they're disciplined, they're steady, they do all the preparation, they really know what it is that they're going to try to accomplish. Their follow through is good. If they say, I'm going to call you at 2 p.m., at 2 p.m., that supporter gets that phone call.
Yeah.
If they say, I'll send you a follow-up, brochure, whatever it is, that faithfulness factor. And then in the appointment itself, I don't think people are looking for mountaintop experiences during support appointments that they somehow are going to, have a revival experience. No. I think they're listening to what that presentation is about, but they're looking deep into the eyes and the heart and the life of that person. How authentic are they? How genuine are they? Is this just a presentation, or is this a face-to-face, eyeball to eyeball, heart to heart, person to person sharing of this person's life and calling and vision? And then when they ask them, they can tell that this is not easy for them to ask. Yeah. But they're willing to step out there and risk the relationship in a powerfully genuine and authentic way, not loudmouth, gregarious, but just in their quiet, introverted way, make the ask and be willing to zip the lip and give that person enough honor and dignity to answer the question. It's not a do or die, abrupt, awkward, will you or will you not come on my team right now for $100? No.
Right.
It's really the beginning of a discussion, of a dialogue.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to put that person at ease. And I think sometimes that introverted person is able to do that more than maybe some of us overbearing extrovert types.
Well, and I guess another distinction that comes up for me is maybe just it really comes down to character more than personality.
Yes. In fact, I think in the last few years, Heather, that's, as I give talks on this subject and things, I think support raising is not near as much about technique or personality or how, exciting or
flamboyant,
gargantuan your results are of your ministry or something. I think it's how badly do you want to get to your ministry? How deeply do you feel called to reach students or to teach, English to these particular students or this mission field, or to the degree that you feel deeply that's going to be a great motivation for you. And it's a matter of character, because you're going to meet obstacles. You're going to have challenges, and what will cause you to overcome those challenges? I think it's a combination that you've really grounded everything in the Word of God. You've studied the Scriptures. You know what the convictions are. You know what the biblical principles are. And secondly, your own character, whether you're willing to persevere through those challenges when everything doesn't go perfectly like you had hoped.
Right. Because it rarely does.
It rarely does.
Yeah.
I'm at a point in my life where I'm saying, rarely does plan A work out.
Can you give us an example of someone who the odds were stacked against, either circumstantially or maybe personally, that saw the Lord provide? Could you help us counsel our listeners that might be thinking, this is way beyond possible. There's just no way. If only they knew my circumstances, I just can't do
I'm
this.
an exception.
Yeah.
I have kind of quit doing the 1 hour workshop type deals on support raising. I used to kind of do those for different groups. And the reason that I've kind of quit doing those is they hear an hour from me and they think they've got it. They've got it. They don't need to prepare. They don't need to do the Bible study. They don't need to come for the 2-day support raising boot camp. They've kind of got the goodies. And so they've kind of been inoculated from really receiving training. The other thing I've experienced at those sessions, without exception, it seems like, is after I give my little talk, my little spill, my little PowerPoint slides, inevitably, at least a couple of people are walking down the aisle, towards me, and I can know exactly what they're going to say. They look at me and they go, Steve, we really appreciate what you've shared today, but you really don't understand our situation. And I try to keep a straight face as if they're going to tell me something I haven't heard before from the 1,500 organizations we've trained and the 40,000 workers and all, So I try to act teachable. And they talk about, the hometown they came from, or the family, or how poor their church is, or they just came to cry. Or how old, or how young, or how shy, or how, the list goes on and on. I think we all kind of have a victim mentality. I hate to say it. Everybody else is privileged but me. And so the reason I can't get to my support is because of this particular reason. And so, I'm not saying some of those are not challenges, and they're not, some people have more advantages than others in the support raising realm, but it really is not a matter of your own situation or your own challenges. Has God called you? Do you have a vision for fulfilling that calling? How do you view support raising? Are you viewing it properly? Are you viewing it biblically? Are you viewing it powerfully with the potential that exists there? And then, are you willing to do what it takes to start and finish that? And I think it's the greatest preparation for personal ministry God ever thought of. I don't know who's listening to this. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying that I literally feel sorry for those people that get the monthly salary check, the golden monthly salary check. But they don't have those 40, 50, 60 people that are praying and investing and partnering with them on a monthly basis. And that worker themselves did not go through the fire, the baptism of fire.
Crucible.
Of starting from scratch and going through that whole process, because there's nothing that's going to prepare them for what they're going to be launching in their ministry like what they had to go through during that support raising. You take all that out of the picture, out of the scenario, they may have a great ministry out there, but they missed some golden opportunities to get really prepared, really trained, really deepened in all kinds of convictions and skills. They're just paid a salary check rather than going through that support raising. And there's lots of examples I could give of individuals that have gone up the mountain of insurmountable odds to get to full support. And then I've got examples of people who had all the advantages. All the perks, all the, they had all the things, all the stars were lined up to be successful in support raising, and they did not make it. And so it's not, I don't think circumstances necessarily are the key to success or failure in that respect.
Yeah. Well, and I think biblically we see it's very evident that God didn't just call people that it made sense to call or that their circumstances made sense. You know, it's always been a him from his own means, providing in miraculous ways for his people. But I think what you're saying is just kind of bringing to mind this phrase that Andy and I have been throwing around of fundraising as formation. You know, it really is a formative season for the work and ministry that we do. And that is really a gift.
Yeah.
It's hard. All formation is hard.
Yeah.
But it's a gift.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody who says, well, maybe he's showing me something about my calling by how challenging it is to fundraise?
It's a common response. It really is, Andy. They believe God has called them into ministry, but then when the going gets tough in support raising, or they have a really hard no or two from somebody who thought was going to really be a supporter of theirs, all of a sudden they start questioning their calling. And so then you get that 1% doubt in the back of your mind, you know, that little revolving door back there, you know, and it becomes 2%, 3%, and 4 and 5 and 10. And pretty soon you're kind of looking at options that, you know, going back to my hometown, selling shoes in my dad's shoe store, all of a sudden seems a little more attractive than, you know, heading to Nepal to plant a church. Yeah. And so how many times have I had discussions with people that have said, I just feel like the Lord is calling me to do this over there, or the Lord wants me to do that. You know, I don't have the heart to say, no, he hasn't. You just have gotten afraid to raise your support, or you're not willing to go to the next level of challenge, you know, but they'll kind of spiritualize it. The Lord has led me here. The Lord has led me there. And
the Lord has led me away from difficulty.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so it's just human nature that we tend to move towards those things that are safe and comfortable, and we move away from those things that are scary and intimidating. But God has not given us a spirit of fear, Paul told young, timid Timothy, but of power, love, and discipline, or self-control. And so there's so many verses in the scriptures that deal with that situation. And if they're going to back away from support raising because they're afraid or there's an obstacle, gosh, I don't know what kind of worker they're going to be out there on the field. I don't think they're going to take steps of faith. I don't think they're going to take steps of risk and overcome their fears. And so we just say, you'll always have fear. I have fear still to this day when I'm sharing the gospel with certain people, when I'm asking them to receive Christ into their life. It risks the relationship when I'm asking a donor for a major number gift, and he might, you know, scratch me off his friend list or something. But how do we walk towards our fears in the power of the Holy Spirit? How do you do that? And that's what the God Ask is all about. The name of that book, I didn't come up with that name. It was a missionary from Kenya that came up with that name for us. And it's a powerful story there in the first chapter, I think is where it is. But how do you make it's not the Steve Ask, it's not the Andy Ask, it's not the Heather Ask, it's the God Ask. And when you realize that it is God that is asking that person to give, not you, it takes some of the pressure and the fear out of the mix, I think. It really does.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as you think back on the people that you've coached, are there certain obstacles, or maybe one obstacle, that causes you to pause when you're working with someone? Do you feel like you can coach anyone to full funding, or are there certain attitudes that are kind of deal breakers?
Yeah, that's a good one. You know, I don't want to set up someone for failure. I'm always fearful that I'll do that. And I don't really do that much coaching myself these days, but I have done a lot over the years. And occasionally I've met with someone and they just, I can tell, are struggling a lot with their own situation, their own life, their own baggage, and some of the esteem issues that they're struggling with, some of the wounds, and support raising has a way of dredging up all kinds of things from our past. Right. You know, there's an appendix item in the God Ask that talks about emotions and your support raising. You can think you're some bold, confident, you know, person, but all of a sudden you're sitting in that appointment, you know, face to face with someone, and asking them to invest in your ministry, and you can just kind of melt into a little mound of jelly, or you're having all kinds of self-perception, self-confidence, self-esteem issues that you're struggling with. And so occasionally I've come across someone that I just, in good conscience, I cannot say, yes, we will bring you on staff, knowing that the support raising is going to be just a total agony for them. It's just going to be, it's going to maybe ruin them, kind of the final step of their demise. You know what I'm saying? Being fairly dramatic here, but so there have been a few instances like that. But I think if they know who they are in Christ, and we spend some time with this in the God Ask.
Yeah.
One of the greatest things you can do, my daughter right now, my younger daughter, is taking a group of sorority girls, and she's been with them for 2 or 3 years, and she's taking them through Ephesians right now, verse by verse. And so we just had lunch together this past week, and we're talking about chapter 1. It's the greatest chapter in the Bible to really understand who we are in Christ. And I think if you can help a person really grapple with the truths in Ephesians chapter 1, as to who they are in Christ, I think that forms the foundation they need to kind of go to those next levels of life and ministry, especially the one where Jesus says the worker is worthy of his wage.
Right.
Okay, well, am I going to believe that or not? Am I going to believe what Jesus says about me? Or am I going to believe what my own struggles and issues in my own mind, the own whisperings that Satan and others and myself are telling me about myself, about how I'm a failure in some way? That's a biggie. If we can view ourselves the way God views us, we are going to be way ahead of the game when it comes to personal support raising, I promise you.
Yeah. And, I think in what you're saying, even in, somebody comes to you and it's just evident, man, you're just not ready for this season. As you said, it will not go well for you. There's an invitation there to still believe that God might be calling you, but that there's a little bit of work to do before you step into the fundraising space, right? And who of us doesn't? Who of us has been unscathed in this life? I think we all bring particular difficulties and areas of wounding that the shepherd needs to heal. And part of our calling can be realizing, there's this area that isn't healthy. I know that SRS talks quite a bit about vision-driven, spiritually healthy, fully funded. That spiritually healthy piece is really important. And it is actually very difficult to be spiritually healthy if we're not like holistically, emotionally, mentally healthy. And so there's an invitation there to say, hey, you know what? You can still be called, but this is just a step before we go into fundraising also.
And fundraising is the impetus to make you push through that, maybe.
Yeah. And maybe, it's the way in which this has been brought up to then walk in obedience, to then take the next step, to then hopefully get to your ministry, which, by the way, when we're not spiritually healthy, when we're not emotionally, mentally healthy, when there's stuff in there we need to work through, we're not going to do well in ministry either.
That's exactly right.
Fundraising brings that stuff up. So does ministry.
And it's part of your story, too, when you did have to push through that. Like, you bring that element to the field with you.
Well, and honestly, I feel like it equips us to be so much more compassionate and to provide empathy to those that we're ministering to understand what it is to have brokenness and to need Jesus to step into that and heal it, Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it is good stuff. Okay, so I know we've kind of touched on this already, but I would just love to hear how you would describe kind of holding the tension of effort and faith in fundraising.
Ooh, that's a good one.
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
Yeah, really. I was also talking to my daughter. Ephesians 1 has all these different, it seems theological conflicts. Does God choose us or do we choose him? And is it free will or is it predestination? In our own minds, we want to try to bring God down into our level of what's just or fair or right or equitable or something. And of course, the answer, do we choose God or does God choose us? The answer is yes. In other words, both. And there's a word, antinomy. It just means two truths that seemingly conflict with one another. No, they exist perfectly in the mind of God. And if we can live with those tensions too and understand Isaiah 55, his ways are higher than our ways, his thoughts higher than our thoughts, then we can understand that it may not make sense to our human minds, but they can coexist. And so is it God that raises the support, or is it us that goes out and does it? Well, yes. Both.
Yeah.
Do I understand the mystery? No, I don't. I don't understand the mystery there. But I do. We try to unpack those concepts in the God Ask early on in those chapters when we're going through the biblical basis. And a lot of that does have to do with personality. I mean, I'm kind of the driven type, kind of the go-go boy. I'm my heroes are Bill Bright and Dawson Trotman and, some of the great visionary leaders of yesteryear. And, but there's a whole side of another Christian leaders out there that their whole focus is just in prayer and trusting God and dependence upon God and letting God go before you and work. And so there's a ditch on each side of those. Mm-hmm. There's a ditch on each side, and we have to know our personality and our which way we tend to lean. And so we just produced a companion book to the God Ask. It's written by Scott Morton.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We've seen that, yeah.
And we produced a couple of them by Scott. He's the former vice president of development for the Navigators. He's really my mentor in this whole realm. No one has studied the scriptures more on the planet, in my opinion, on all these subjects related to support raising and giving and tithing and asking and all the subjects that relate to all the money subjects than Scott Morton has. So we're going to keep publishing his stuff. Mm-hmm. But here's the name of it. It's called God's Presence. And what it is, it's a 40-day devotional that while you're raising support, if the God Ask seems like, just get out there and, get your name list together and get your appointments and, get your ask and get her done. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it can feel that way sometimes. So we're trying to kind of, Shadrach's, fleshly, humanistic, man-made approach on one side, we'll bring Scott Morton's, God's Presence book, and maybe somehow we'll kind of reach the perfect balance there, right?
Yeah.
And so, no, I think all of us tend to gravitate towards one or the other in man's effort, us raising our support, or it's God that is doing it. Well, it's a both and it's a mystery. But the God Ask, and now this new book, God's Presence by Scott Morton. But we provide both those books in our boot camps. If someone wants to go through one of our support raising boot camps around the U.S., or now they're in a number of other countries, they'll get those two books as kind of along with their registration. So I love this new one by Scott. It's perfect. I was after him for years to write it, and he finally did. It's a great one.
Good. Nice. I think I saw it on Andy's desk.
You did indeed.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, this is a little bit of a divergence, but I think it's an important question for a lot of our fundraisers. Have you ever worked with somebody who has a predominantly secular network? And if so, how did you help them? Like, what were some tips?
Well, that question is asked in different ways over the years. Should I ask a non-Christian for support is kind of another way of asking that. Let me address your question and my own that I just mentioned. It's kind of in the same category. First of all, I really don't know who's a Christian and who's not a Christian. God knows. Some of the most genuine, authentic people that I've ever met are some of these fraternity hellions that I meet with. They're just so honest, so real, so genuine, so authentic. We Christians tend to kind of put up a little mask and, we're all always perfect. And so I really don't know who's Christian and who's not Christian. I don't make that determination before I ask someone for a support appointment. Really, I look at who my network is. That's a God-given network. That's not there by accident. Those 100 people, those 200 people that are in your network, they're there for a reason. And I've seen several people come to Christ through support appointments. So don't underestimate the power of a support appointment that can turn into an evangelistic opportunity.
Yeah.
And what I've realized is that most people have never had an individual support appointment with a Great Commission worker. That's kind of an unknown, scary concept to most Christians and non-Christians. And so when you're meeting with someone one-on-one or one-on you and another couple or something, don't think this is happening to them all the time. For the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, that's probably going to be the only time in their entire life that they will have an individual appointment with a Great Commission worker who's going to lay out their vision for them, ask them to come onto their team, zip the lip, and let them answer. And so that's a tragedy. It grieves me that most Christians will never live 60, 70, 80 years and never even have the opportunity to have an appointment like that. But I would not, if I knew someone was a non-Christian, I would use some different wording, in my presentation. I wouldn't, use all this religious lingo, we're going to plant, disciple-making, multiplying churches among unengaged, unreached people groups in the 1040 window. No, don't do any of that. I'm just saying we are going to help people that are in desperate physical and spiritual needs come into a relationship with their Creator. And we're going to do, so I would use language that I think was going to be more understandable to that person.
More approachable.
But I would still invite them. And the reason I would invite them is because if they do come on your team, and now you're sending that newsletter to them, and now you're maybe connecting with them once or twice a year on the phone or in person or whatever it is, your contact with your team, you're probably going to be the only light in their darkness. You're going to end up maybe leading them to Christ because you asked them to, come onto your team.
Yeah.
So there are some challenges to having primarily a secular network, but what great evangelistic opportunities, and probably they've never been approached before. It's not like they're all, worn out from support appointments. No, they've probably never had one.
Yeah.
And I'll finish off my little tirade here by quoting D.L. Moody, that great evangelist from the 1800s in our country. People say, well, do you take money from non-believers? They were criticizing him because he was taking money from non-Christians. He goes, yes, I take the devil's money, I wash it in the blood, and I spend it on the kingdom. So I kind of like that. I kind of like that.
Yeah, I do too. And I really love the way you reframed that circumstance where somebody's looking around at their people and they think, oh man, my people aren't like-minded. Well, instead of viewing that as an obstacle, actually saying, wow, God has divinely appointed that my people are not like-minded. Why would he do that? And what invitation is here to do his work
to engage
in that
them.
space? Yeah, I love that.
I would much rather have that scenario than having if I was a person that grew up in a Christian community in a big Christian church that are approached all the time with Christian workers, and I'm the fifth appointment that month that they'll have with someone, and they're kind of getting burned out and cynical on giving money to Christian workers. I'd much rather have fresh, new people that have never had the opportunity to hear about the Great Commission or to invest. Whether they're Christians or not, I'd much rather have that scenario.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Where does social media fit in?
Oh, boy. Sorry for the deep sigh there.
No, that's great. Yeah.
We get it.
I guess I've just seen so many people, take so many shortcuts thinking, Steve, you don't understand just how popular I am.
Right.
I've got 8,000 followers.
Yeah.
And I can, at a snap of a finger, and I just put a little give button on my deal, send a blast out to my 8,000 followers, and boom, I've got my money raised. Well, maybe if you're Tim Tebow or somebody, I don't know, maybe that works. But I just have seen kind of the quick and easy shortcut, just use the internet versions tried so much and failed so much. It just kind of takes the personalness and it's not about money. It's not about money. That person really thinks it's about money.
Yeah.
It's not about money. It's about vision and relationships and mobilizing those people to truly partner with you. And if you take a quick, easy social media route to that, you might raise your money. Probably not. You're going to be disappointed more times than not. But I don't know. You can tell why I kind of wince at that. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because even if somebody did raise their money, what formation does that provide? And ultimately, how does that prepare you? Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a college athlete one time come on our staff and years and years ago, and this was, no one would know who this is, but he was very popular, very, very popular. And so we trained him how to raise his support. And he said, well, Steve, the Lord has told me to do a different way. Oh, is that right? Okay. Well, tell me about that. You know, He goes, I've listed my 100 top relationships, because he had people knew him from all over, my top 100. And I'm going to ask each of them for, I forgot what the number was, certain monthly amount. And if those 100 people, I'm including an envelope, and they'll get started with their gift in this envelope, and within 2 weeks, boom, I'll be at full support. I begged him not to do it. He said, no, the Lord has told me. Oh, well, what are you supposed to say then? No, he hasn't.
Right.
No,
right.
You can't say that.
Yeah.
So he went out and he sent his 100 letters out. Well, about 2 or 3 months, he kind of comes back into my office until he was a little more teachable.
Yeah.
Out of the 100 top people, he had gotten 2 letters, two envelopes back.
Wow.
And they were the dreaded one-time gifts, not monthly commitments at all. So anyway, if there was anyone that could have raised his support quickly and easily from people that loved him and knew him, it would have been him. But I don't know. I think the quick, easy shortcuts usually short-circuit things.
It's a little counterintuitive. You're saying, here's a vision that I believe in, but I also want to know the easiest way I can raise support with as minimal effort as possible. It's what it feels like.
Good point.
So you wrote The God Ask. I think it was published in 2013. What are some of the notable changes in fundraising within the last 5 years or so? If you had to add a chapter today, what would you write about?
Yeah. How we contact people. It always changes. It's always morphing. You'd have to write a book every year or write a new chapter or change a chapter every year. And we do revise that every couple of years, and that's mainly the area is, how is it that each generation is communicating with each other? And so if the old fashioned way was to write a personal letter and then follow up with a phone call to set up an appointment, well, people don't answer their phone anymore. I mean, they're offended when you call their number. They'll receive a text from you, maybe. Yeah. But if the phone actually rings and they're, what are you doing calling my phone? Oh, I thought that's what phones are for. No, no. And everybody has different one. I have probably 5 different ways I communicate with people. I can't keep up with them. Did they send me? Was it on Messenger? Was it on WhatsApp? Was it on Instagram? Was it on email? Was it text? I mean, how did you communicate with me? And so, but everybody has different preferences. And so you kind of have to know what a person's preference is. And some of that is generational. The 20-somethings are going to, have differing current ways than your 50-somethings.
Absolutely.
And so to know kind of what all the changes and the different forms of communication is, that's probably the most challenging and frustrating part, is actually getting hold of people to even set up the appointment. Right. I yearn for the old days where there was just this phone and it rang and you picked it up and you said, hello.
And it had a cord.
You had no idea what was on the other end. Those were the good old days,
right. Steve, as someone who has been on support for decades, what encouragement do you have for those that find themselves needing to dramatically increase their support? They've already been on the field, they've successfully been fully funded, and now they, for whatever reason, need to see an increase.
It's a real important question, a real key one that's commonly asked. And we've been doing these personal support raising boot camps now in a major city around the country for 22 years now, every month. I would say probably over the years, 60, maybe 70% max are newbies, people that are just, needing training to get started. But then 30 to 40% many times are are veterans. Like you said, that are coming back. Either they've never been properly trained or their support has just come so low. I mean, they hit a crisis point. There's a pain point, you know. And I remember one time I was doing one of these boot camps and I looked over and there was a man, he's probably 60 years old, and he was weeping. He was crying. I said, oh, man, did I mess up again? I must have said, one more insert foot in mouth comment I must have made, you know. And afterwards, I said, sir, did I say something that offended you, you know? He goes, no. He says, I just wish I had gotten this training 30 years ago. It would have saved my marriage and my family so much pain, you know. And I tell you, that's a big motive for me. I want healthy marriages. I want healthy families. And the statistics show that the stress and the concern and the worry over money is almost always the main point of conflict between couples and leading to divorce. Marriages and families have enough challenges without adding this full financial stress piece to it. The greatest member care, I've come to this conclusion, every organization needs to have a member care division or at least a person. But I think the greatest member care that you can provide for your people is getting them to full support and keeping them at full support. Now, the husband, he may be in total denial. You know, no. I can live in a van down by the river underneath the bridge and I'd be fine. Well, that's not true of his wife and the kids, you know. And so I think to understand getting them to full support and keeping them at full support is the greatest thing you can do for them, their longevity in ministry, their ability to focus on ministry and not be worried about money, their marriage, their family, how healthy their kids are going to grow up, their view of God and ministry and money and support raising. It's all tied together. It's incredible how it's all tied together. But I would encourage that veteran who's underfunded to not lose hope and to humble themselves and say, maybe I never really laid the kind of foundation I needed. I would venture to say they've probably never done the 15 to 20 hours of Bible study. They just launched right into ministry and right into support raising. So I would get them to take a season off here, give them 3 months off, come back. Let's really prepare thoroughly for like a boot camp type of training, really do the Bible study, go through as if they're a newbie on support raising. And what I have found that more times than not, that the support that they need, it exists right there within their team, but they've never asked their team to increase. They've never really asked their team for appropriate amounts to begin with. They've never thought creatively outside the box of other ways to ask their team to partner with them outside of just these small monthly gifts, you know? And so there's all kinds of new perspective and conviction they can gain, all kinds of new training, all kinds of new ideas that can spur their mind and thinking and really just give them hope. I think some of them come back beat up and battered and without hope, and they're about to leave the ministry. And you need to give them hope. And we can do that. We can do that. If they'll read the God Ask, if they'll do the Bible study, if they'll come to a boot camp, I'll bet you 30 to 40% of our people, and boy, we have testimony after testimony after testimony, just saying, I've been on sport for 25 years, and man, this changed everything for me. So it can happen. It can happen for sure.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time. We would love to give you space and opportunity to share with the listeners where they can find you and any projects you're working on that you would be excited to share. I know you've shared with us the book that you guys released. Certainly, we do make people aware of the boot camps, but is there anything else you would want to put before our listeners?
I'm just part of the Center for Mission Mobilization. Mobilization.org is the website, and one of our resource ministries is Support Raising Solutions, and that's supportraisingsolutions.org. And we've been packing it for 20 years with all kinds of resources and tools and articles and podcasts and webinars and things. So they can certainly go there and see some different helps for them, whether they're brand new or they're a veteran, whether a coach or a exec or a leader in some way. The only thing I'll mention beyond that is every 18 months we have a Support Raising Leaders Conference. I think this is the 5th one we've done, and so it'll be in Colorado Springs this upcoming April, I believe. they can go to that website and see. But it's for the executives and the support trainers and coaches of nonprofit ministries all over the U.S. and beyond. We'll have 10 or 15 countries represented as well, probably 400 to 500 that will be there. And it's for organizations that require their staff, to raise their support. It's not 3.5 days of how to raise your support. It's how to give leadership, how to shape the culture, how to create the infrastructure, all the things you need from a leadership standpoint to help all of your staff get spiritually healthy, vision-driven, and fully funded to perform their ministry assignments in the Great Commission. So go to that website, and we'd love to have you participate in that conference that's coming up in April of 2023 in Colorado Springs.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Yeah, we'll try to put some links in our show notes and also link to the God's Presence, Scott Morton down there as well. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, so final question, and this is what we ask to everybody as we kind of wrap up this show. Okay, so hypothetical, you have $10,000 that you have to give away today. You've got 5 seconds to decide who or what do you give it to?
I'd give it to my friend Robel, who is the director of Ivasu Campus Ministries across the country of Ethiopia, to replace the 30-year-old piece of junk that he's driving around Addis Ababa. That's what I'd give it to right now.
That's wonderful. And you mentioned you just came from Ethiopia, right?
I just spent 2 weeks there. 1 week with Robel, the director of Ivasu. It's the largest campus ministry. There are 100 campuses across Ethiopia. And then I spent a week with Teraku, one of our key partners there that oversees a mission agency, Horn of Africa, and a mobilization ministry called Mission Engagers. And so we spent a week training campus ministry staff and student leaders and a week training missionaries. Boy, do they have a mission sending strategy to send workers all over that part of the world, mainly among the Muslim unreached people groups in Somalia and Sudan and Eritrea and Djibouti and the list goes on. So God is at work in some tremendous ways in Ethiopia. And so that would be where I'd give my $10,000.
Well, I just have to make the connection and point it out in case anybody missed it, that I don't think it's surprising that you just had face-to-face interaction and experience with their vision, and that's immediately what you would give to. It's powerful to have face-to-face.
Not a coincidence.
Vision casting interaction. So wonderful. Well, Steve, again, thank you so much for your time. It has been a real delight to speak with you and to just gain so much wisdom from your years of experience.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And that's a wrap.
God bless. It's Not About the Money is presented by Provisio Fundraising Solutions. Provisio equips support-based workers with flexible training, practical resources, and one-on-one coaching. Find out more at provisiofundraising.com.